AWS On Air, and we are live at the New York City Summit here at the bustling Javits Center. My name is Jillian Ford. I'm a startup solutions architect. I'm here today with an amazing host.
I love the title. It's always amazing. You always give me that amazing
You
title.
are still always amazing.
Always amazing.
Yes.
Wow. I have to live up to that now, though. That's a lot of pressure, Jillian. Thank you. I'm AM Grabelny, another host here on AWS On Air, a solution architect as well. And we've got a very special guest with us, Raghav. Tell us who you are,
Hi.
please.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Raghavara Sorabatina. I'm an enterprise solution architect based out of Boston.
And I mean, the theme today, it's 2022, and analytics is something that every organization is thinking about implementing. And so what does that really mean now in the modern day and age of data streaming?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the value of data is really, really important when the data is real. Real means when it is happening.
Real.
For example, let's take an example, right? If any customer, we have been using like credit cards, right? If any customer is coming to their website, they're using the credit card, and you really need to see whether that credit card activity is fraudulent or legit, right? I mean, if you do after the fact, the damage is already done, right? That is where you wanted to really unlock the value of identifying whether that transaction is legit or fraud, right? That is where this real-time or streaming analytics will come into play. If you look at the slide which I'm showing, earlier it's like data is very silos. I mean, we started with like collecting data in a relational database, like a data mart, like we have a ERP database, we have a small division database, and then we transition into the data warehouse to do the aggregation and historical analysis. And then we have a data lake, right, where you can bring the data from multiple sources and then analyze the data. But in addition to analyzing the data, the value will come into play when you wanted to take like a reactive and proactive kind of a thing, right? That is where real-time analytics or real-time streaming, right? We call it as a modern data streaming architecture. That is what I'm going to talk today. What is the value, why we have to do it?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that you brought up earlier on, Raghav, is that all data isn't equal, right?
Yeah.
And data can get stale.
Yep.
And there are certain use cases where data becomes extremely valuable based off of when it happened, right? Like if somebody's sitting on your website right now about to purchase something and you need to nudge them in that direction, it's not going to work. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah, they've already left an hour later.
I will give you an example. That's a very good point, right? I talked about the fraud detection, fraud prevention. Let us talk about user personalization. That's what you are talking about.
Yeah.
In Amazon.com today, what we do when a customer is visiting and he's shopping around, right? What we do basically, we provide personalized recommendation based on what he is clicking, right? That is what we want to basically do the buy and sell, right? That is where we use Amazon Personalize based on user action. You can basically generate the recommendation to the shopper, right? So that you can convert that into a business, right? You can increase the revenue. It is not only e-commerce. It could be anywhere else. For example, in an insurance company, right? They sell the policies. Generally, most of the customer, they do the B2B. They sell the policies through an agent. Let's say, and the agent, right? If I'm an agent, I'll be selling policies to many insurance companies, right? I mean, I'll try to see where I'm getting more commission, right? That's what I see.
Yes.
So what you do, right, as a customer, right? Always they will have their own agent portal kind of a thing where agent will come and see the products, what to sell on behalf of your company. You provide personalized recommendation to the agent, saying that these are the products where you can get more commission, right? So that you can generate a lot of business to you, as well as the agent will get more commission. Overall, you are going to increase your revenue.
Yeah.
That is where real-time value will come into play.
And I think that leads us to the piece of there's collection that's needed on that side. And in the case that with Amazon.com itself, that's massive amounts of people generating massive amounts of data that's happening in micro to milliseconds.
Right.
So you need the specialized data collection.
Right.
in data pipelines and streaming that data, right? So what are some of the services that AWS has?
Yeah, before going services, right, I want to talk about a little bit of architecture, right?
Yes.
I was talking about.
Great.
If you look at the screen which I'm showing, right, this is like a reference architecture. It can be implemented any industry or any use case. First thing, it will start with the source, right? Your source could be anything. It could be coming from your application. It could be coming from your social media, like Twitter, Facebook, whatnot, because that is very important, because social media is evolving now, and you need to really see what customers are talking about your product, right? That way, you can take some correction then and there. And then you can collect the data from the IoT devices, right? That is another way of collecting the data, and then you take like a real-time decision. And once, now you have a lot of sources. How to collect the data? That is where streaming ingestion part will come into play, right? And you should be able to collect the data from wide variety of sources so that you can unlock the value of the data. And then, as data is coming, right? Imagine if you are collecting a data from a device. It's like a lot of data is coming, right? You need to have a storage mechanism, and you need to replay the data, right? You don't want to have a data, right? For example, I'll just talk about the one example of the difference between message queue and streaming, right?
Right.
Message queue is like you are getting a data, like let's say if you get an e-commerce order, you collect the messages from the message queue and then you process it, done. But here you will, in the streaming data, it's a continuous, and you wanted to have a more consumers. What it means, let's say you are collecting a, some streaming data related to device. One, you wanted to monitor, right? Make sure that all the devices are working perfectly. Another is you want to provide a recommendation. Another is you want to take an action. Our action could be if you see some machine or a device is not working, you send an alert, right? There is a multiple consumers. That cannot be possible with message queue. That is where this streaming storage, right? That is where it come into play. I'm going to talk about what are the AWS services in next slide. But next one is that once your data comes, right, you need to really process the data, right? Before you integrate into your application. I was talking about doing the fraud prediction or fraud prevention, right? In order to your application to consume from the streaming data, you need to process it so that it is ready to consume into your application.
Right.
Right? And then destination, right? Destination could be anything here. I was talking about event-driven application where you really wanted to show then and there. And then you can also collect the data into a data lake, and then you can do the offline analysis. And some customers also store the data in a data warehouse like a Redshift. That is where you can do the aggregation and historical analysis so that you can improve your product marketing or campaign, whatnot. And then OpenSearch, right? Sometimes you want to see the overall dashboard, right? Let's say you don't want customers are waiting for your website to go down, right? Then you just see what is happening, right? That is where operational analytics and log analytics will come into play. And you see in a real time what is happening to your application. If something is going to happen, you can take action then and there. So now I'm going to talk about what services we have here, right? As I talked about, your stream sources could be anything, IoT sensor, enterprise apps, or social media, or logs. And then ingestion, right? Anything related with IoT devices, you can use the AWS IoT Core to collect the data. And Kinesis Agent, it can work with Kinesis data streams and Kinesis Firehose. And AWS SDK, if you want some customization from applications, you can use the AWS SDK to stream the data into stream storage, right? And then if you want to capture the database change capture, that is where you can use the DMS, AWS DMS. And then we have MSK Connect. MSK Connect is like closer to Apache Kafka Connect, and it is managed services. And we have here two storage services. If you see Amazon Kinesis data streams and MSK, Amazon Managed Streaming for Apache Kafka, right? They both can be used for stream storage. The difference is Kinesis, Amazon Kinesis Data Firehose is basically, it is developed, inverted by Amazon, and it is all based on streaming data and then shards. That's where your data is stored. And you can manage the capacity, everything through shards and all. Whereas MSK is a popular open source Apache Kafka, and it is a managed services. It all comes with basically MSK cluster, where you will have a topics, and then topics are stored in basically partition. It's the same thing. There we are calling it a shards and partition. and what to use when. If you are very familiar with open source technology, Apache Kafka, we advise customers to use MSK. But if you're just starting, you wanted to have a more native integration with AWS services, we recommend customers using Kinesis Data Stream. And then we have here streaming analytics, right? For example, I talked about we have a lot of consumers, right? That is where you can use the Amazon Kinesis Data Analytics so that you can integrate your applications into your application, right? You collect the data, you process it by using Kinesis Data Analytics, and then consume that processed data into your application. And sometimes, if it is a small thing, you can use also Lambda. Let's say you're collecting the data and you want to send an alert, right? It is stateless, right? I mean, it's only once, right? That is where you just use the Lambda, use the SNS, and a simple notification if you see some fraudulent activities happening. And you can also use either AWS Glue or EMR if you're familiar with Apache Spark. You want to do some data processing, you can use the AWS Glue. And if you want big data processing framework, you can use the EMR. And then by using Kinesis Data Firehouse, you can deliver the data to S3 or Redshift and Amazon OpenSearch. And the outcome you see here, there is an outcome here. It could be an automatic decision. Automatic decision, we talked about it, right? If a credit card transaction is coming, you're going to find out it's a legit fraud, right? Yeah. I mean, approve it, deny it, right? And then interactive dashboard, right? Where you wanted to see what is happening, right? What is happening means it could be monitoring your application to see how your application is performing. Otherwise, let's assume like we are running a market champion. Today we are running Amazon Prime, right? You want to see what sales are happening. Yeah. That is where you basically create an interactive dashboard. Based on what is happening, you can add more items based on the demand, right? And how you can build the interactive dashboard by using Amazon OpenSearch service. You can build the interactive dashboard and see what is happening, and you can measure your campaign, what is happening. While it is happening, you provide more recommendation. If let's say if customers are buying a lot of, let's say, maybe Alexa devices, right? You show those recommendations, different varieties of Alexa devices. I'm just giving some example just to make it simple, right? And then real-time machine learning, right? That is where you are going to do the real-time personalization, right? One could be whatever the data is coming. You see what event is customer is clicking on it. You fed the data into Amazon Personalize, which can get you the personalized recommendation based on the past purchase history. That's how you generate a buy, sell kind of a thing where you can generate more revenue.
Raghav, were you going to show us this in the AWS console?
I'm so glad you asked. I'm so excited.
Yeah, I'm going to show AWS console.
Yes.
We got about 4 minutes.
I'm not going to talk about it. This is just reference architecture. It is based on AWS well-architected framework. It is available. I'm not going to go to that. So let's talk about the demo here, right?
Yeah, let's get
there we go.
The demo architecture is, there is a company called Audio Devices Company. They're producing a lot of audios, and they want to see what are the audio tracks are very popular, and when these audio tracks are being played, while walking, while sleeping, while sitting, that is what they want to see, right? And what are the popular ones? That is where what we are going to do here, I'm going to use a Kinesis data generator. It's kind of a tool where you can generate streaming data into Kinesis Data Firehouse, and then we are going to store the data into S3, and then we are going to use the Glue to basically transform the data, and then we'll place it in processed data, and then we use the Amazon Athena, where data analysis can see what are the audio tracks are really popular, right? And what are the top 5 audio tracks being played, so that they can produce more of those audio tracks to increase their revenue potential, right? And then some business users wanted to see what are the audio tracks is being played when and all. This is the architecture. I'm going to AWS Management Console. I'm going to show now.
Yeah, let's check it out.
Yeah, this is the AWS Management Console. This is the Kinesis data generator, and where I have a Kinesis Firehouse, and I just put 200 here. This is where I'm sending a data. When you see that, right? This is sending a data. I'm just stopping here. I already sent the data.
Yeah, and I just want to call out that this is on AWS Labs. So if you want to kind of play around with this afterwards, you can go look for it on AWS Labs.
Right. So, and then what we go, right, you can basically go to the Glue, and then you can create a crawler, right? You can create a crawl here, and then you put a name, And then what it does, it creates a catalog for you. That is where you have a raw data, right? You have a processed data. And then we have a Glue Studio here. If you look at job details here, Glue Studio is basically just for few clicks, you can just do the data transformation. For example, I have a data is coming from 2 S3 bucket. This is the raw data, and this is the metadata, and then I'm joining it. Sorry, I'm joining it, and then I'm doing a little bit of transformation here. What kind of transformation I am doing here? I'm removing some of the columns which I don't need it. I am changing basically here track ID to the string instead of integer. And then when I do this, this whole data will be stored in my processed bucket. This is where my processed data, I converted data, it is there. Now I'll go to and see Athena, right? You wanted to see who are watching and all, right? This is the Athena screen where you see that while doing the running, there are 133 users are basically doing, right? While sitting, traveling, walking, right? So based on this, you can basically find out what they're doing, right? And then if you look at the quick side, right? Sorry. If you look at here, this is the track being played, right? And then if you look at this is the audio track name, artist, right? How many times it is being played, right?
Wonderful.
So this is kind of a dashboard where customers, you can build the real-time dashboard so that we can talk about which audio is being more popular so that you can produce more and to generate more revenue stream.
Great. Raghav, where do I go to learn more about data architectures on AWS?
Yes, I wrote a white paper on build modern data streaming analytic architecture. You see I'm showing here.
Oh, great.
And customers can go and read it. I talked about how to build this modern data architecture, and it talks about how to create different types of architectures.
Great, wonderful. All right, nice. So go check out Raghav's white paper, but be sure to stick around for more content here on AWS On Air.
Yep.